You're listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, Michael here. I wanted to jump in before this episode with another update on live events. We talk about them in a loose way at the end of this episode, but I wanted to give y'all something a little more formal up front. First, I'll be at Congregate in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, July 12th to July 14th. And the same weekend in the same place, I'll be part of their partner event, the Saga Genre Writing Conference. On Friday the 12th, I'll be teaching a workshop on genre blending and fiction. And on Saturday, I'll be recording a live episode of Arcane Carolinas with friends of the show Gary Mitchell and Tally Johnson. I'll put a link to both conferences in the show notes. Then, on Tuesday, August 13th, I'll be emceeing and reading at another group reading by the North Carolina chapter of the Horror Writers Association. That'll be at Moondog Meadery in Durham, North Carolina, and I'll put a link to them in the show notes also. This is an event we're doing in partnership with Durham Public Library, and you know how much Charlie and I love libraries, so I am really excited about that. After that, beyond that date, we'll be back together at Arcana in Durham, North Carolina on September 26th for the spooky season kickoff recording. I'll put a link to Arcana in the show notes, and we'll post a link for free tickets up in August so we can make sure we don't, break any fire codes. We're really looking forward to spooky season this year. We have got a bunch of topics lined up and a lot of work to do to get ready, and it is going to be a ton of fun. There is so much fun stuff that Charlie and I are going to get to talk about. We are really looking forward to it. And now, on with the show, and thanks for listening.
Hello and welcome to Arcane Carolinas. I'm your co-host, Charlie Muirshaw.
And I am your other co-host, multi-award-winning novelist and single award-winning podcaster, Michael G. Williams.
Multiple runner-up.
It's like we talked about last time, though. Silver medals look pretty good,
Mm-hmm.
All things told.
It'll melt down. You can sell it.
Gosh, that would be tragic.
Bleak. Future's bright, kids. Stay in school.
Welcome to the optimistic season of spring.
So, full disclosure, Michael and I have been on this recording session for about 2 minutes, and I'm pretty sure he's already picking up that I'm tired. I'm not particularly stoked on this story. And I don't want to sell you a bunch of crap. So it's going to be a Charlie looks at this one with a whole heap of skepticism kind of tale.
So be it. I have no idea. I don't think that this is the story I thought it might have been. If that sentence parses at all, it's a miracle. But bottom line being, I went into this thinking I might know what the story was about, and then I convinced myself that I did not. I have not looked at the notes. But in general, this is a topic that I find sufficiently creepy that I like to stay away from them. So I'm going to treat it with the utmost respect.
That's a running theme, honestly, in this. So this is an Arcane Destinations episode.
One resolved audio problem later, Michael and Charlie continued recording.
So the last good audio we had was I said I was going to treat it with the utmost respect, and you started to say that's a running theme.
Okay, so here we go. We are back. I don't know how this is going to shake out in the edit, but I just changed my mic because my other mic decided that it didn't want to play. Probably because I disrespected this topic.
I'm not going to say I told you so, but I'm going to say that I did mention it.
So here we go. Michael, I'd like to acknowledge the fact. Did I already say that this is a Destinations episode?
You started to.
Okay, so this is an Arcane Destinations episode. This story has nothing to do with the Carolinas, except that I see people in the Carolinas talk about this sort of thing regularly. Today's story is actually out of Florida, which is why it's a Destinations and not a Arcane Carolinas proper. We are going to be talking about a very famous haunted, or depending on your outlook, cursed object.
As somebody who spent my teen years obsessively watching Friday the 13th, the series, which was about two cousins and another guy who inherit their uncle's antique shop full of cursed objects. I love the cursed object thing and also am terrified of the cursed object thing. And since you said Florida, this means it probably is a story that I know just like the tiniest scratch the surface amount about. And thus, I will be saying nothing but kind things about the thing.
That thing is Robert the Doll.
Okay, keep going. Yeah. No, I'm definitely not going to mildly freak out the entire time you're talking.
So you're familiar with Robert the Doll in broad strokes?
In the sense that I know it exists.
Yeah, so that's pretty much where I was at. I knew that there was this haunted or cursed doll. It had been on like the spooky TV circuit, or people put it on unscripted television, talk about it. There was a horror movie made that was directly inspired by it. But I didn't really know much beyond that other than creepy haunted doll or cursed doll that could move on its own from time to time, and bad luck would befall you if you disrespected the doll.
That's at least 10 times what I'm coming into this knowing.
Oh, okay. So we're just going to jump right into the doll. As a Destinations episode, sometimes we'll focus on local lore or local stuff that's peppered throughout on this one.
Sure.
The doll originally belonged to someone named Robert Eugene Otto.
As in OTTO or as in AOTO?
OTTO, like Otto from The Simpsons, driving the bus, like that, Otto. He was described as an eccentric, an artist, and a member of a prominent Key West family. I looked this guy up right off the bat. He existed. His gravesite is listed on findagrave.com or whatever the website is. Yeah. So Robert the Doll started as a gift to Otto when he was a small child on the Florida island of Key West. Have you ever been to Key West?
Oh, yes. I have been to Key West once. I really, really loved it. I really want to go back. The vast majority of my activities there are maybe best left for another show that is not this one, but only in the sense that it's a real party town. But also, Key West has one of the, and I mean this absolutely sincerely, deepest and most unexpectedly spiritual experiences that I've ever had. There is a place there called the Butterfly House, and it is an enormous greenhouse, I guess you'd say. When I say enormous greenhouse, though, you cannot fathom how large this place was. Greenhouse full of plants, and some of them are endangered and some of them are not. And it has this winding walk that you take through it. And it is also a preserve for species of butterfly. And they put out food sources that are appropriate to the butterflies all the time. And they're just like right there. And they're not behind screens or in cages or whatever. This is just a giant open air space where butterflies are able to live in a protected state. And so you'll just be like walking along and butterflies will just come up and land on you, and they'll land on your hand and they'll crawl around on you sometimes. And otherwise they just fly around in this place, and it is unbelievably gorgeous. And there is something about the experience that provokes immediate reverence when people walk inside. And so something that I realized walking around this place with some friends of mine was that none of us were speaking and no one in the place was speaking. Everyone was just like really in that moment, coexisting with these incredibly beautiful creatures. It was very significant to me in a way that I can't really explain, except that when we walked out at the end, it felt like waking from a dream. It was very strange.
That's cool.
I really love Key West. Really love Key West.
So I have never been to Key West, but I am familiar with the long bridges from the movie True Lies and the pie. The key lime.
Oh, yeah. There are huts everywhere. If you think of cotton candy huts at the beach, there are those, but they sell key lime pie.
Oh, okay. Cool. I'd like to go one day. I will probably not visit anything to do with this object. The patriarch of the Otto family built a house to accommodate his family in Key West in the 1890s, and that house still stands today and is known as the Artist House. It's a nickname that came about from the talent of the namesake of the doll, Robert Eugene Otto. He commonly went by Eugene, Gene for short. And the family lore stated that he could draw and paint before he could talk. I would argue, having watched children grow up, you could very loosely say that about any child.
Finger painting exists for a reason.
Exactly. So I'm not totally bitten by that fact where they're like, oh, he was this super genius that could do. I'm like, okay. I've hung things on the fridge too.
He was the Amadeus of finger painting.
Sure. Okay. When Gene turned 4, he received the doll. It was a 3-foot tall doll for his birthday. And it was stuffed with wood shavings and dressed. We're not really sure exactly what it was dressed in originally.
Okay. I feel like there's something weirdly ominous about that.
Here's the thing. So what it wears now is a sailor's outfit
Okay.
with shoe buttons sewn on for eyes.
Oh, this is already very distressing. Okay.
But the thing is, there's a lot of different versions of this legend, like any legend, especially ones that get put on different TV shows and commodified into films, and lots of different versions of this. The most common that I found was that the sailor outfit is actually one of Robert Eugene's outfits from when he was that size.
Oh, that is desperately not okay. Okay. Just, okay. Keep going.
So variations on who exactly gave him the doll also exist. Some variations say that it was given to him by a black servant who came from the Bahamas. So a Bahamian. Just want to make sure I'm saying that right. A Bahamian that worked in the house.
I believe it is pronounced Bahamian, but I could be wrong.
And then this variation of the legend splits as to the giver's intent. Some say that it was given because she genuinely cared about him and wanted to give him a big present, since the doll was about the same size as him when he received it.
Okay.
Others, which smack of not great sentiments, say that she was resentful of the family, and it was actually a giant voodoo doll that was cursed and given to them.
Okay. I'm going to not launch into my knee-jerk 20-minute lecture on how that is a concept that white people have.
Right. It very much feels like a...
Yeah. I'm going to question the religious practice accuracy of that.
So there's already 2 splits in where did this doll come from and why did he receive it. There's already what was it wearing when he got it. Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
In the book, accurately titled Robert the Doll, author David Sloan says that the most likely story is that Gene received the doll from his mother. She was white, but also Bahamian, which may account for that little detail getting stitched in.
Mm-hmm.
And the doll can very easily be traced manufacturing-wise to a specific toy company in the same German town where Gene's mother visited right before the birthday that he received the doll.
Ah, okay. That's some tidy history right there.
Yeah. Doesn't matter how he got it. What matters is that he got it.
Yeah.
And he named it Robert after himself.
No, do not. I'm here to tell you, kids, no, do not. I actually think that where he got it matters a lot, but we will come back to that. Just remind me.
Sure it does, as far as like origins of the... Oh, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
However he got it. And we're going to call him Gene throughout this to delineate between the doll and the owner.
Oh, thank you.
Gene loved the doll. Carried it with him everywhere. He was the youngest, so it was a really great companion for him because it was something his size as opposed to all the older siblings and stuff. You can play with your older siblings, but sometimes you want something that's like just for you, right?
Yeah. And he wouldn't have to feel so alone at the back of the line of little ducklings, basically.
This is where it starts to get scary.
Oh, we're already there for me, but sure. Go ahead.
Gene would talk to Robert, as one does at a young age, to inanimate objects and imaginary friends. But it was after a few months that family members, guests, and servants started to claim they heard another voice talking back.
Okay. Yeah.
Deeper and more forceful than Gene's, that at times took on a dark tone and was berating him.
I know that I find this very genuinely creepy. Also, in my imagination, I just pictured a very popular doll from film speaking in your Satan voice.
Oh, yeah. Hey, how's it going?
Heck yeah, let's play checkers. I love it.
Shoots and ladders. Now, this is before all that. This would be more like tiddlywinks.
Hoop and stick.
So supposedly after she heard a rather loud and angry sounding conversation from Jean's room, his mother rushed in. As she was approaching the door, she heard a thud and she saw Jean cowering in the corner while Robert was sitting on a chair in the middle of the room.
No, right into the fireplace.
Scurrying noises and my favorite band name, Phantom Giggles. Reported throughout the house.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I'm done.
Phantom Giggles is just an ambient noise art band.
I was going to ask, what genre are they? Okay.
Yeah, they're the kind of band that when you walk into a bar and they're playing, you're like, you know what? It's fine. We can just ignore them.
I would be very into that. Yeah. I would love it. I would probably be Durham's biggest Phantom Giggles fan.
Depends on the night. But if I just want a quiet night, I don't want any noise.
That's fair. Yeah.
I should have stayed home in this fictitious scenario that we've now played out way beyond what it should have for a throwaway.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So anything that went wrong in the house, furniture falling over, bed sheets unmade, doors locking, Jean would always say, Robert did it.
The secret horror origins of so many Family Circus cartoons right there.
So eventually, the great aunt who lived with them suggested that they banish Robert to the attic, and the family was in agreement.
I say get a representative of every major religion and a few minor ones and try to just banish Robert. But
author John Harker, in his 2015 book, Robert, Demonic Dolls, True Tales of Terrible Toys, claims that great aunt turned up dead the next day.
Oh, yowza.
So Robert's in the attic. Jean continues to grow up, hones his artistic skills, studies his craft at several different universities, meets a young pianist at a French conservatory, and they marry. They moved to New York City and lived there from 1930 to 1945. Jean would paint. His wife performed frequently at the Rockefeller Center. These were people of influence in the art scene. Came from a big family, went to New York, applied their trade.
These are not people who are living in obscurity with their weird doll. If she's performing at Rockefeller Center, it's a little like finding out that, I don't know, that Carol Burnett has a haunted doll in her attic.
Tragedy strikes in 1945 when Jean's mother dies and leaves him the house.
Uh-huh.
The wife was not excited about moving, did not want to leave the city, but she went anyway and settled into a routine that she thought she liked. However, Jean found Robert again.
No.
And he resumed his obsession with the doll.
No. Instant deal breaker. I am just going to be Liz Lemon from that 30 Rock episode right there. Deal breaker.
His presence seemed to reactivate the what we'll call haunting, with giggles and phantom footsteps returning to the house. Neighborhood kids would claim they would see Robert in different windows, which I love as a prank.
Okay. As a prank, yeah, I like that a lot.
I knew a guy, he had, it was like life-size cardboard stand-ups.
Yeah.
He had a Ninja Turtle from the 1990 movie, and he would move it between windows in his house. Funny. Reminded me of that. I seriously doubt he listens to this show, but if he does, I hope he hears that and thinks it's cool that I remember that from so long ago.
I'm just going to note that if it were 1945 and I had inherited a house that I knew had a haunted doll in the attic and it was in Key West and I were a prominent member of the arts and literary world, I would simply send a telegram to Ernest Hemingway, who also lived in Key West, and say, there's a case of gin in it for you if you'll just go burn the house down.
Jean's wife hated Robert.
Rightly. I mean, that with the greatest respect.
Did not like her husband's obsession with him, did not like the weird things at the house. So she just sold the place outright.
I like it. Okay.
After he died. So Jean dies in 1974.
Oh.
She sells the house and moves to Massachusetts and lives happily ever after.
She moved to a little town called Arcane and everything was fine.
Yeah, it was great. New England. Nothing ever happens up there. Speaking of that, somebody made this point and it made me laugh. I forget where I read this. but it was talking about whenever you're reading stuff set in New England, read it in a Boston accent and it makes it even more hilarious. Like,
I mean, that's the thing about all those Lovecraft stories.
it's just too funny to like think of that. So the next two owners of the artist house were bothered so much and so repeatedly that by 1994, then current owner Myrtle Reuter donated the doll to the local Fort East Martello Museum.
So when you say bothered, what was happening? Or were they willing to say?
It's just more of the same stuff. Phantom giggles, footsteps. One report said that the doll's buttons would seem to change expression from time to time.
I have to take a moment and catch my breath after that. Okay. I have too vivid of an imagination sometimes about things that bother me. And wow, that one is a real unpleasant thing to envision.
It's the doll that you hate.
And deeply respect.
That is really tied to the haunted history of because people that leave the area are no longer bothered by the doll. It's central that you got to be near the doll to be bothered, whatever. But Key West has a reputation for being one of the most haunted cities in America, according to Key's Weekly magazine, which also sounds like giving yourself the blue ribbon at the fair. But
that said, the one time that I was in Key West, my friends and I went on a ghost walk, which is one of my favorite ways to experience a new place. Mm-hmm. And on that ghost walk, we ran into 5 other ghost walks. And every 5 feet, there was a ghost story. There is a lot of history there. And if you believe in hauntings, there is a lot of potential for hauntings.
I'll tell you why. That wasn't a setup. So the doll's a big reason. And each place it's lived, like each building it's been in, has had problems. The artist house still stands. Like I said, it's now a bed and breakfast. It's a tourist site. Robert was supposedly the first supernatural phenomena to take hold, obviously, because they built the house around him, essentially. They built the house and then brought him in. But he wasn't the last. Guests will report hearing not only Robert still, but also seeing a wisp of a woman, who many say is Jean's wife, who is rumored to haunt the house where her doll, arch nemesis, obsessed her husband.
My mind immediately races to 2 possibilities: that it trapped her there, or that she feels a responsibility to keep an eye on it.
Right. It's great. It could go either way. I got this. But his current location, the Fort East Martello Museum, is adapted from Civil War construction. It was originally built against human invaders, but they never really showed up because Florida.
Yeah.
Not just Florida, because Key West is not very convenient.
No, it is definitely not.
But mosquitoes are obviously an issue, right? And so during the Civil War, in the era of its construction, yellow fever was a big problem. And there are rumors that some of the soldiers that died from it are encased within the fort's walls.
Oof, not good.
It now stands as an art museum and museum dedicated to Key West's haunted history. So yeah, bodies in walls, movement of the thing from place to place, lots of reason for there to be hauntings in the area.
Definitely. That actually was a museum that somebody recommended that we go see while we were there, and we just didn't have time. I was just there for a few days with some friends, and we had pretty packed schedules.
So, as I mentioned, he was donated to the museum in 1994. He has been there ever since. And at first, they just stuck him in the back, covered him up, then put him with other things that weren't on display. And then the curator disappeared with no explanation.
Oh, okay.
And, quote, other things began to go wrong.
Uh-huh.
Poltergeist shenanigans started up in the museum. They moved Robert and put him prominently in his own glass case, and the museum now centers entirely around him.
Okay. Uh-huh. I mean, maybe that's good. Maybe that appeals to his desire for attention or revenge or something, and so that's good. But that does not increase my desire to go.
Would-be ghost seekers and paranormal researchers go to Key West for visits. They're obsessed with this thing. Robert seems to be okay with you if you follow these rules that the museum has in place. You must greet the doll, say hello when you come into the room where he's displayed. You must ask permission of the doll to take its photo.
Okay.
You say thank you and goodbye when you leave.
Okay.
Guests who don't do these things have reported stuff going wrong with their visit. Mostly translates to electronics malfunctioning, display lights flickering or going off. One guest reportedly said their pacemaker glitched.
I'm raising my eyebrows.
Yeah.
Also, I'm not going to go there with a pacemaker.
Cameras will fail around Robert if the rules aren't followed. A TV show tried to film a segment about the doll, but couldn't get their HD cameras working until they apologized for Robert for not asking his permission to film there first.
Okay.
And hard drives that were used so that book that David Sloan wrote about Robert the Doll, that author claimed that the hard drives he used to store his manuscript about Robert crashed while he was working on the book.
Okay.
And that they were able to recover everything from it except the manuscript.
I'm going to raise my eyebrows at that also, but sure.
Some of the theories around possible explanations for Robert the Doll. One involves a voodoo curse that Jean's nursemaid, Emmeline Abbott, supposedly put on Robert before giving him to Jean. According to the book by Sloan, again, lots of good stuff in there. She and her husband, William, worked for the Ottos while Jean was growing up. And that sometime between 1900 and 1910, Emmeline lost a child, and some psychics claim that the energy they see in Robert is that of her dead son.
Okay. I'm uncomfortable with a lot of parts of that, but
yeah, it gets a little like, what are we doing with that?
Yeah.
Some people are saying, some say that Jean unconsciously projected negative energy into Robert when the two are so close. And that's what animates Robert, is Jean's negative energy.
The emotions of a child are very strong, positive and negative. If there's something sitting there just like waiting to soak up those emotions.
The alternative is that of the Jean energy theory is that Robert is not actually harmful and just houses the spirit of a mischievous little boy who's attempting to vent frustration.
Sure.
Neurologists have been asked to answer why so many people perceive Robert as looking at them or moving behind their backs or making noises. And social psychologist Ilan Shrira wrote about a gaze detection system in Psychology Today. It's hardwired into part of our human nonverbal communication system. And it's a self-preservation thing. It has to do with knowing what's looking at us and from where. And it's one of the reasons why we've developed peripheral fields of vision for better movement detection. But this hyper-awareness overfires in our brains sometimes in situations that we expect to be tense, like when we visit a haunted doll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like a version of apophenia, where you perceive things to be a way based on your beliefs or expectations.
Yeah. And, if you've ever been in the grocery store and seen somebody at the other end of the aisle and thought, oh, I think I might know them from somewhere. Where do I know them from? And you look at them, you're not staring at them, you're not studying them, you're not creeping on them. You're just trying to figure out, do you know this person? And you let your gaze linger just like a second too long. And even though they're not looking anywhere near you, they all of a sudden look at you. That's just that instinct in action.
I'd like to get into some theories here in a second, just spitball, but I think it's worth noting that we talked about this has been made into movies. Right. Been on paranormal television shows. It has been written about repeatedly in newspapers and in books. The podcast Lore, which is a very big podcast, covered it. It's an A-lister.
Yeah, definitely.
In this space. And for me, what's interesting is that you can, the maker of the doll, like we know the maker of the doll, it was, let me find the company, the Steiff Company of Germany. We know where it came from, probably. I'm willing to buy that version of its origin. We know who owned it. We know that there's over 100 years of weird stories around this thing. That's cool to me. Do I believe that it is haunted or cursed? Plays more into my openness to the idea that there are parts of the human brain that might be more sensitive in some people than others. Mm-hmm. And that some people may be able to perceive something is going on there, whereas others are just like, I don't know, man, it's a doll. What do you want? I don't want to mess with it. I'm not big into haunted objects or cursed objects. Like I don't really go for the, let's walk around the thrift store with an EMF detector and see if we can get it to go off. And then make TikToks about it.
Right. Thrift store, yes, but the EMF detector in the thrift store, no.
Yeah, like I can't get into that. I think that the projection of energy or whatever you want to call it on a wavelength that maybe we can't understand, all of us, I certainly don't, a la stone tape theory. I think it is at play here.
I'm going to go a little further into the weird than that, but it comes from stone tape theory as its foundation. We are very good at perceiving what could be interpreted also as faces. and things. You think about like the movie Cars gets its origin in this. It's really easy to look at the front end of a car and assign it facial features. We're really good at looking at the moon and seeing the man in the moon, things like that. We're very good at assigning human features to things. And I'm a total believer in stone tape theory because it would explain so much. I feel like it's one of those things that for me just makes sense, but that does not mean that anybody else needs to believe in it or agree. But I kind of wonder if a step beyond that is when there are things that we look at and we just feel like they are more human than the average other object. A doll, for instance, the same size as the child who receives it.
Probably wearing the child's clothes.
I feel like there is a way in which it is even easier for us to sort of imbue human features again on this thing. But those features are not simply physical. Those features are perhaps a little psychic. And maybe just by force of having so many people look at it and think that is a person, then eventually it kind of takes on a certain amount of personhood. Almost as if everybody has added one stitch until it's all hemmed up. It's the taffy pull of psychic imbuing a phenomena. So many people look at it and just feel like it's human that eventually it is. Or at the very least, it is capable of projecting back or reflecting back some of what has been sent to it in the way that it becomes a psychic mirror for people. I think that sort of event is possible. I think that sort of event is also very rare, which is another reason why I don't take an EMF meter with me when I go to the thrift store. I just don't think that the average person is going to run across that in the course of their life in a real and like deep way. At the same time, I think that when we think about, especially if we've ever lost somebody who's close to us because they've passed away, there can be objects that just feel like they carry a little bit of that person in them.
Absolutely.
And I think that in something like this, where it's not just carrying a little bit of Jean in it, but it's also carrying a little bit of the aunt that hated it so much, and of the mother who bought it, and of the servant who might or might not have been involved in giving it to him, and now of the many, probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who have gone to this place that has been turned into a shrine to it. I think that it really starts to soak stuff up at that point.
See, I'll challenge you on that.
Go for it.
And present an alternative theory that I have. And this is going to sound very cynical of me, but think of a battery. The initial charge of the object comes from the mother, from Jean, from the aunt, from all that, right?
Right.
And the other homeowners and the museum owner that experienced something. But then it's commodified and it's put on display and it's given the shrine. At that point, for me, I would theorize, at least, that charge starts to get drained, or to use your analogy, those stitches start to get pulled out.
Oh.
Now it's just on display. Everybody can see it. There's nothing to it, really. And slowly, bit by bit, it just becomes commodified. It's in movies, it's in books, it's in newspapers. It's no longer an object or place of power because it has been used up.
Interesting. Very interesting. I like that theory too. That's a really cool question to pose.
And the idea for that, and this is all off the cuff, we're just having a conversation. This is where my notes are long done.
Yeah.
But I think my theory from that comes from so many times you can meet, and we've done this. I mean, you have had experiences. You'll meet someone that has an experience and they know it was real. They know that they experienced what they experienced, right? But then you take somebody else to that spot and it just can't be repeated, right? Like maybe they absorbed that experience and that was it.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe they're only attuned to it. Maybe it's something that only certain people have their internal receiver attuned to the right wavelength to pick it up.
Right. I feel like you have this object, you have people that have had very intimate experiences with it in their home. Like this thing is in their home and weird stuff is happening and they hate it. And this persists amongst very small groups of people. And if you open it up to a larger group of people, it dilutes it or drains it or however you want to frame it, takes a stitch away from it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea.
But as always, we don't claim to have the answers. And if we did, you could tell us we were lying. Because this is all just theories.
Yeah. Another, I don't know if metaphor is the right word, but an illustrative example of what you're talking about. In some ways, the Oracle of Delphi only had power by virtue of where she sat. Like beyond the sitting on top of hallucinogenic gases, you had to go to a place and then make a journey within that place to get to her. And then she's at the back. You go to a classical temple or a pyramid or anything like that. The god is always in the inner sanctum.
Mm-hmm.
And if the god or goddess is brought out into the courtyard, do they still have that same kind of power over us anymore? And I think that probably not. That's probably why the inner sanctum exists. One of the reasons why the inner sanctum exists.
Pull the wizard out from behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's really interesting to think about. I am going to play it safe and stick with my version and say that I am just going to solve this problem by never going there. But if I did, I would hate doing it. And I would absolutely do the thank you and goodbye and greet it when I walked in and ask its permission and everything. And I would hate every second of that, but I would do it. It would run very counter to my natural inclinations, but I would want to play it very safe.
That's Robert the Doll. Got a bunch of comments over the years about haunted objects and cursed objects and decided, you know what, we're going to do one. Now you know my thoughts on haunted and cursed objects.
At the very beginning, I commented that I think that the origin actually matters a lot. And that's because I think the point of a lot of folklore is buried in the first sentence or two.
Yeah.
And so whether the doll was given as an act of generosity or as an act of revenge, I think really defines the point that the teller of that version of the tale is trying to make. It's one of those things where folklore tends to put the point front and center and then have this big elaborate reveal of it also.
That is an excellent point. And once again, you articulate so what was going through my brain that I couldn't get out. And that was the ones about the servant. I was like, that really says more about the person that came up with that version of the story than it does the story.
Yes. There are obviously many different points that could be made with those variations. And somebody's making a choice when they go with that variation.
Don't give me haunted objects. I don't want them. I think they're weird and freaky and mostly fake, but the ones that are probably weird or cursed, I don't want them in my life. So you can keep them.
I'm reminded that a really dear friend of the show once gave us bricks from what he said was the original shooting location of the first Evil Dead movie. And when we got them, I said to you, because we didn't know this person yet, I said, I'm going to be doing some things to this to make sure that it is not bringing anything with it. And I feel like there's a really strong chance that if there is something to the doll phenomenon, I've tried really hard to not even say its name, then I think that it's not difficult. Maybe this isn't if I were going to use it in a story. It's not difficult to imagine that if this thing is imbued with a sort of mischievous child spirit, that it occasionally opens the door for other things to let a little chaos in. And that is the part that actually really scares me, the potential it has to be unpredictable.
So you bring up a good point. We got a message recently about Ouija boards, and it was just like it fell distinctly into the Charlie says no.
That's one where Michael also says no, just because I'm not skilled in the use of that.
I'm like, you know what? No. If I tell my kid not to talk to strangers, why should I?
Yeah.
Anyway, what do we got going on? It's summer. My project that I've been working on for the last couple of months should be wrapping up here in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then we can talk about it just in time for spooky season. We'll be at Arcana for spooky season, for the spooky season kickoff. I have been hard at work on some of the most over-the-top Arcane Carolinas tie-ins I think we've ever done.
They're really cool, though.
And I'll be doing a library thing in South Carolina in October. I need to get more details on that locked in. I'll be at Fayetteville State University doing an author's reading for Volume 1, just in time for your book, Volume 2, to come out.
Okay, look at that.
Yeah.
I am right on the verge of finishing up the first draft of Arcane Carolinas Volume 2. We have another Horror Writers Association North Carolina chapter reading that is going to happen sometime in August in Durham, North Carolina. So for folks who came out to that in March at Raleigh, then we'll be doing one in Durham. And we've got Spooky Season at Arcana in September. And I'll be at Congregate in July. And the same weekend in the same place, I will also be teaching a workshop on genre blending for genre writers at the Saga Genre Writing Professional Conference.
Cool. I'm very excited to get a copy of the first draft so that I can read it and get inspired and make doodles for you.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, that's it. We can't wait to share all the stuff we're working on. We're doing our slow season thing, and we appreciate you hanging in there with us. We'll be sure to be back in the fall with all the crazy stuff you like. And some stuff you probably don't, because not everything's for everybody. You can't please all the people all the time.
We have to consciously choose to displease everyone once in a while just to keep them on their toes.
Fairly certain this episode will displease some people.
If people are really deep, true believers in this, there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody being a really deep, true believer. I am not a really deep, true believer, but I am wary of it and simply wish to be respectful just in case. So it's not like there's a ton of space between us.
Yeah. I have a wheelbarrow full of doubt and a coffee mug size serving of respect for it.
Yeah.
We finally are doing a print on demand merchandise store. I posted the link on social media as like a test run the other week. I ordered a whiskey glass for myself with the bat logo on it because I want to see what the quality looks like. But we will be making that more widely available soon, probably in the fall, maybe a little bit before then. If you are so inclined to go look at it now, you can do that. The link is on our Facebook page.
Yeah. And thank you very much for setting it up. That stuff is really cool.
Yeah, hopefully it works out. People kept asking, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And we're just two dudes that have other jobs. So sometimes it gets hard to keep up.
Yeah.
For example, the stuff that I've been working on for the fall, I started back in January.
Yeah.
And now we're approaching June as we record this, and I'm still not done. Stuff takes time. Print on demand is a way for us to make cool stuff and not have to worry about doing the logistics ourselves. So if you want to check that out, there's a post on the Facebook page.
Good deal. I'll say this. People love the bat logo. Those bat logo stickers just fly out the door at any event.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. For more episodes, behind the scenes information, and links to our social media, check out www.arcanecarolinas.com, where you can also buy the Arcane Carolinas book.
And if you like award-winning horror and science fiction, check out my books at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com or visit my publisher, Falstaff Books, at falstaffbooks.com. And if you have story suggestions, comments, or questions, email us at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.
So cut this part.